So I want to thank you all for being here today. This forum will come to order. We're going to have a lot of people moving in and out because there are other hearings going on at this time and other meetings, but there is enormous interest in what we're doing here today. And I want to stop to say a word of appreciation for each of our four witnesses and for everyone who's joined in support to be part of this. Last month, in the face of an unprecedented attack on public education, led by co-presidents Donald Trump and Elon Musk, I launched the Save Our Schools campaign. Now, Trump, Musk, and Education Secretary Linda McMahon are determined to make it harder and more expensive for working class and middle class kids to get an education. And Republicans in Congress are now piling on as well. So let me be clear. I will fight for public education for all of our kids, all of our parents, all of our teachers, all of our grandparents, everyone who wants better lives for our children and for themselves. And that is why I'm holding today's forum called Stealing the American Dream: How Trump and Republicans are raising education costs for families. At a time when college costs are already too high, when the American dream is already out of reach for far too many people, President Trump and congressional Republicans are making it harder for working class families to get ahead. First, they want to eliminate the Department of Education. This is not rumor, they have said so quite openly. Now, keep in mind, that is the agency that gives millions of students a chance to go to college when their families can't afford the sticker price and just the ability to be able to write a check for that. It is also the agency that is charged with protecting students and borrowers from bad actors like shady student loan outfits and predatory for-profit colleges. To be clear, the money we invest in post-high school education is not charity. This is an investment in our people so that they can get good jobs, so that they can start businesses, so they can grow the economy. We all benefit from the increased education of others. But Donald Trump has already fired half of the federal workers who make these investments. He has also signed an executive order to try to get rid of the Department of Education altogether. And to top it off, he is trying to dismantle the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which would take the cop off the beat for protecting student borrowers. And if you thought that you could count on Republicans in Congress to stop this madness, think again. Nope. They are making things worse, much worse. Last month, House Republicans advanced a bill to make higher education even more expensive for American families. Why? So they would have more money to pay for tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. The bill the Republicans advanced would increase monthly student loan payments. It would trap borrowers with student loan debt for even longer periods of time. It would make it harder for those who are eligible to get Pell Grants, and it would end the rules that protect students from bad schools and from greedy for-profit colleges that rip them off. So ask yourself, who benefits from putting all these costs on people whose only sin is to try to get an education? Only Trump's billionaire and millionaire friends. They want to cut these education investments and use the money to stuff their pockets with tax giveaways. And adding insult to injury, now they are going after people's Social Security checks as well. We've already seen the Trump administration work to gut Social Security, which Elon Musk calls a Ponzi scheme. President Trump has let DOGE run rampant at the Social Security Administration, laying off employees and closing field offices. Last month, the Trump administration announced the next phase in their plans. They are getting ready to hold back Social Security checks from student loan borrowers who are in default from decades-old student loans. Almost 500,000 seniors could lose their Social Security benefits. So I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today, and I want to thank you for helping educate families on how these Trump policies would hurt Americans. I also want to point out who is not here today, the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. I invited her to join today because she has a lot to answer for. The questions we would ask her are pretty straightforward. Why is the Secretary of Education jacking up costs for middle-class kids who are trying to go to college? Why is the Secretary of Education firing the staff who protect students from scammers? Why is the Secretary of Education taking away Social Security benefits from tens of thousands of seniors with student debt? Secretary McMahon refused to answer those questions in front of the American people. Instead, she asked for a meeting. So I'm happy to sit down with her, but if Secretary McMahon won't face parents and teachers and students and families, if she won't face the people who have been hurt by her reckless actions, then I want to make it clear. I'm going to take their stories directly to the Secretary of Education. So today, I want to ask everyone, share your stories. Please send them to our Save Our Schools campaign, because there is power in sharing our stories, and there is power in fighting back. And that is why we are here today. So thank you all for being here, and I want to introduce our witnesses. Ms. Bonni Latreille is the former acting deputy Chief Operating Officer and Student Loan Ombudsman for the U.S. Department of Education. Now, previously, she co-founded the Student Borrower Protection Center. She has also worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Thank you for being here, Ms. Latreille. Next, Professor Jonathan Glater is a law professor and associate dean for JD Curriculum and Teaching at UC Berkeley School of Law. He is also the co-founder and co-director of the Student Loan Law Initiative. Thank you, Professor Glater. Am I saying it right, Glater? Glater, for being here. Third, we have Ms. Tiffany Aliche. Am I saying it right? Good. Ms. Aliche, also known as the budgetista. You all should think about this, right? The budgetista. I love this. She is a personal finance educator and influencer. Previously, she was a preschool teacher for over a decade. Thank you, Ms. Aliche, for being here with us. And finally, we have Ms. Bonni Snyder, who is a U.S. Army veteran. She was cheated by a predatory for-profit college, Argosy University, and is here to tell her story today. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Snyder. I appreciate it very much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Latreille for her opening statement. Ms. Latreille, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I would like to thank Senator Warren for extending the invitation to testify today about the Trump administration's efforts to push higher education further out of reach and increase costs for working families across the country. Before serving as a senior fellow with Princeton University's Debt Collection Lab, I had the distinct honor and privilege of serving in the government under the last 4 administrations, first at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and eventually at the Department of Education, where until recently I served as student loan ombudsman. Serving as ombudsman over the last 3.5 years has been the highlight of my career. However, in implementing its right-wing Project 2025 agenda, the Trump administration sidelined me and many of the people sitting behind me today. I want to recognize my bright and talented former colleagues who are here. These individuals dedicated their careers to helping students and borrowers achieve the American dream. And because of that, the Trump administration illegally fired them. I want to share a document highlighting firsthand accounts of how the efforts to dismantle the Department of Education will harm students and families we swore to serve. For the past several months, President Trump and his billionaire buddies, including Linda McMahon and Elon Musk, have taken aggressive and unprecedented actions to hurt American families. Despite the president's claims, these actions are not saving costs. In truth, they are an expensive and expansive attack on the American dream, intentionally designed to ensure that this dream is only attainable to a privileged few. Congress directed the Department of Education to manage the student loan safety net, which was designed to promote economic mobility and financial stability. That is the American dream. I am driven to do this work because as a Pell Grant recipient, a student loan borrower, and a public service loan forgiveness beneficiary, I have seen firsthand how impactful it can be. But sadly, for the vast majority of borrowers, the student loan safety net is broken. President Trump's agenda is destroying the American dream. Embodying their move fast and break things ideology, Trump and Musk's Department of Government Efficiency have ironically broken any semblance of efficiency for students, borrowers, and the families who rely on the Education Department's services. In a matter of weeks, nearly 2,000 department employees were illegally fired or pushed out of their civil service positions. This includes dozens fired from the Office of the Student Loan Ombudsman, who were charged with helping those who struggled with their school or servicer. As a result, more than 10,000 students and borrowers have been left waiting for responses to their complaints. And another 2 million borrowers stuck in repayment limbo have no place to turn as they try to access affordable monthly payments. This is President Trump's vision for efficiency. Bad actors are profiteering on taxpayer dollars. But instead of holding them accountable for the harm they perpetrate on the American people, President Trump is enabling them through aggressive and ill-conceived cuts to the department's work. The Trump administration directed FSA staff to cut back on the, quote, Cadillac service it claimed borrowers were receiving. To be clear, student loan borrowers have never received Cadillac service. But now, Trump wants to give them a jalopy made up of call throttling, repayment application backlogs, and rampant misinformation. Unfortunately, treating student loan borrowers like second-class citizens is nothing new. For decades, the student loan market has been plagued with bad actors looking to make a buck on the backs of borrowers. These companies lie about loan forgiveness, delay loan discharges, and drive borrowers into high-cost repayment plans, leading to a lifetime of financial consequences. But instead of fixing these problems, Trump fired the entire team responsible for conducting oversight of these companies. And then, when consumer advocates and state attorneys general try to hold these companies accountable, the companies assert that they are above the law, as Mohila has done in half a dozen lawsuits in the past year. Federal student loan companies have captured the federal government that keeps them in business, and in the process, created an environment where their bottom lines are more important and more powerful than the needs of the American people. And to make matters worse, the administration is haphazardly turning on collections in a race to steal the wages, Social Security benefits, and tax refunds of 5 million financially distressed borrowers in default. Amid record inflation and a cost of living crisis, these borrowers will face the full weight of the federal collections apparatus, with no real infrastructure to ensure student loan debt collectors are complying with the law. President Trump's attacks on the department are putting education out of reach for all but an elite few. These attacks are propping up a market of predatory companies who will leave Americans deeper in debt. These attacks are making the American dream a pipe dream. I thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Latreille. Professor Glater.
Thank you, Senator Warren, for that welcome and for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name again is Jonathan Glater. I'm a professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley, where I teach courses on education law and policy. I'm also a former student loan borrower, and I am speaking here today just for myself. Over the first 100 days of the Trump administration, we have witnessed a series of administrative actions and legislative proposals by the majority that will make it more difficult and costly for students in working-class families to pursue higher education. That matters because higher education is associated with several good things, including higher incomes and lower rates of unemployment, and is a good in and of itself. Unfortunately, the current congressional majority and the Trump administration appear bent on undoing major policy initiatives that have worked in the past to make higher education more available. Making higher education less accessible lifts the ladder of opportunity out of reach of those working class families. And in my brief remarks today, I will identify some of the policy changes having this effect. In March, the President signed the executive order directing the Secretary of Education to, quote, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the department and return education authority to the states, unquote. In the same month, the administration fired nearly half of the department's staff. As a result, we will have less information on student outcomes, less oversight of the private businesses that play a key role in the federal student aid regime, and reduced ability to investigate predatory schools and reports of discrimination experienced by students. Rather than promoting efficiency, which is the justification, the reductions in personnel will undermine the ability to perform essential administrative and regulatory functions intended to protect students and taxpayer dollars. Earlier this month, the Department of Education announced the resumption of collections on defaulted student loans. More than 5 million borrowers currently are in default, and another 6 million are severely delinquent, having gone more than 90 days without making a required payment. Our analysis of the most recent government data suggests this vastly understates the potential financial harm. We also expect the administration to shut down the Biden administration's affordable repayment plan, SAVE. Overnight, that means that 8 million borrowers could face spikes in their monthly student loan payments. As a result of these policy shifts, we estimate that overall 1 in 12 adults in the United States will be directly and negatively affected by the Trump administration's actions. Further, the proposed Republican reconciliation bill will reduce financial aid, increase financing costs when students borrow to pay for higher education, and make repayment afterward more onerous. The bill would end subsidized federal direct student loans, increasing college costs, and removing a key funding stream that helped over 4.2 million students pay for higher education in the last academic year alone. One estimate projects that the elimination of subsidized loans would raise costs by $12,000 for a typical borrower over a 10-year repayment period. The bill would place limits on the amount students could borrow in federal loans, forcing them to turn to loans made by banks and other private lenders to cover a greater share of their higher education costs. These private loans often carry adjustable rates that are almost always higher than the rates on federal student loans, and they do not offer the flexible repayment plans or critical consumer protections that federal loans provide to borrowers who are experiencing financial hardship, for example. The bill would impose new income restrictions and enrollment requirements that would reduce eligibility for Pell Grants. This will hurt students with the greatest financial need. One analysis found that this policy could result in loss of Pell eligibility for more than 900,000 students. The legislation would remove important consumer protections, such as the statutory basis for excluding from federal aid programs those schools that saddle graduates with excessive debts relative to their incomes. It would also weaken protections for borrowers who were deceived by their school or who attended a school that closed before they could complete a course of study. In closing, I would be remiss if I did not note some additional context. The Trump administration's use of the power of the federal government to try to end programs that promote education access for members of historically excluded groups. The administration has been distorting the law in an attempt to force colleges and universities to shut down efforts to make higher education more accessible and more successful for students of all backgrounds, and the administration has retaliated against those institutions that refuse to comply with its demands. The overall result of these policies is the entrenchment of inequality. As the title of this session puts it, we are witnessing efforts in both the executive and legislative branches to put the American dream out of reach for working class families across the country. Thank you again for the invitation to speak, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Professor Glater. I appreciate it. Thank you. Ms. Aliche.
Well, thank you, Senator Warren, for inviting me to testify today. My name is Tiffany Aliche, but you may know me as the budgetista. I am the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, a former teacher and financial educator who has spent the last 17 years helping over 2 million Americans climb out of debt and collectively save more than $250 million. I appear before you as someone who believed deeply in the promise of education as a path to the American dream, and as someone who nearly lost everything when that promise was broken. My parents came to this country believing in hard work and education. My father, an accountant and CFO, taught me to budget, save, and navigate debt. But even with that foundation, I was nearly crushed by a system that piles on obstacle for working families. In 2001, I earned my undergraduate degree in business. Like millions of students and families, this was only possible with the help of federal financial aid, including student loans. Thankfully, I was able to pay off my undergraduate debt while working at a child care center where I discovered my passion for teaching. A few years into teaching, I was able to buy my first condo and felt like I was on track towards my own version of the American dream. In order to advance in my education career, I eventually pursued my master's and had to take on $50,000 in debt. Not long after graduation, I fell victim to a credit card scam that pushed me even deeper into debt. Then the 2008 financial crisis happened and I lost my job. I will never forget the overwhelming dread I felt as a result of this tsunami of debt, the sleepless nights, the fear, the anxiety. The debt felt insurmountable. As a result, I lost my home. I moved back in with my parents, my mental health declined, and I fell deep into a depression. But I was one of the lucky ones. My family opened their doors to me, like my sister letting me sleep on her couch, just so I can get back on my feet. I was able to access unemployment so I could cover my basic needs. I worked odd jobs just to help pay my bills and eventually began working at a small nonprofit where I was tasked with supporting economic stability of vulnerable families. During this time, I realized just how valuable a safety net and support services are to people when things don't go according to plan. Now, let me be clear, it should never be this hard, and not all borrowers have the support system like I did. It was this journey that led me to create my business, The Budgetista. Now I receive thousands of messages from people across the country struggling with financial issues, including the crushing weight of student loan debt. But in my nearly 20 years of this work, I have never seen the level of fear and economic anxiety that I'm seeing right now. An unprecedented number of people are desperately asking for help. These are people who are already feeling crushed by the cost of basic goods and necessities. Teachers, nurses, social workers, and parents who did everything right. They got degrees, they took out loans to invest in their futures. But now they're trapped. They're terrified of their monthly student loan payments skyrocketing and their paychecks being garnished. They ask me, when my payment jumps to $900 a month, where am I going to find that money? And I'm still paying my own loans. How am I going to be able to send my babies to college? It has been troubling to watch the current administration take such aggressive actions to gut the Department of Education, push affordable repayment options out of reach, and unleash collections on borrowers who are just trying to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. The reconciliation bill will only make things worse and make paying for college even more expensive for families that I hear from every single day. I know this weight personally, but I was lucky and I had a clear path to fix it. Today's students and borrowers, they don't. They're caught in a storm of uncertainty. Will their relief applications vanish into the void? Will Congress slash the programs they rely on while handing tax benefits out to billionaires? How can anyone financially plan for their future when they don't even know what their next month's bills will look like? A hero of mine, Mr. Rogers, once said, "In scary times, look for the helpers." For millions, the Department of Education is that helper. It is the team that processed their debt relief, the staff who process applications for students scammed by for-profit colleges, the financial aid applications, the financial aid programs that make college possible for first-generation students like me. The current administration's efforts to attack access to higher education are an abandonment of the American dream and promise. It tells families like mine and those who I work with, if you want higher education, then you're on your own. Well, I'm here today because I refuse to accept that. I've dedicated my career to being a helper, and I implore our leaders in the administration and Congress to be helpers too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aliche. I really appreciate that. I love the Mr. Rogers quote in it. Ms. Snyder.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Senator Warren, for inviting me to participate in this critically important conversation. My name is Bonni Snider. I traveled here from Newport Richey, Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. I'm a proud Army veteran who honorably served this country for 18 and a half years. Hooah! Although I no longer serve my country in the armed forces, I continue to serve my country offering mental health services to those experiencing mental health crisis or living with substance use disorders. My dedication to service began at a young age. The fourth of 14 children, my parents instilled in me the power of higher education to unlock the American dream. Nicknamed the family Brainiac, I was never questioned whether I would pursue a college degree, but rather how many degrees I would earn. In high school, I decided to pursue a career in the military to create a pathway for my educational pursuits. My time in the military would result in multiple degrees and lead me toward my career in psychology. This work is incredibly personal to me. A survivor of sexual assault, it was a wise and patient psychologist who saved me from the guilt and turmoil I struggled with for years. I knew I wanted to pay it forward and spend the rest of my career supporting survivors and ensuring no one would have to experience what I had to. At age 48, I completed my master's degree in psychology and was accepted into a doctorate program at Argosy University, Tampa, a for-profit college chain that heavily recruited veterans. I thought, this is it. I was so close to completing my dream. This dream turned into a nightmare. There were red flags along the way, but by the time I was able to add it up, it was too late. During the admission process, recruiters promised me because I had completed my master's degree, I would be fast-tracked into the doctorate program. However, I realized nothing was being expedited. In fact, during my first semester, I realized I was being forced to repeat classes I had already taken and pay for them all over again. I was told none of my prior credits would apply toward the program. Instead, I was being awarded a second psychology master's. Each semester, I visited the financial aid office only to see my tuition skyrocket. When I asked questions, the financial aid office only told me that it was being covered by financial aid, and I was never told the amount I was borrowing or the rate of interest accrual. I trusted them and signed on the dotted line. Perhaps the most insulting blow was during my third year of the program when I received the first of 2 cancer diagnoses. Although the dean insisted my health was a priority and school would be there once I was cleared to return, this was not the case. Calls, visits, and emails went unanswered and ignored as they simply refused to allow me to finish my program. In 2019, the school closed abruptly, leaving me and thousands of others with no degree, no job placement support, and mountains of debt. My time at Argosy left me with over $165,000 of debt that later ballooned to $300,000 or more. It still infuriates me to think the years I wasted at the school that should have never been allowed to prey on me and my fellow students, especially veterans. In 2022, I heard about borrowers' defense to repayment, a process overseen by the Department of Education where borrowers defrauded and cheated by schools could get relief and justice. I submitted my application and waited. However, in 2024, my loans were discharged due to my 100% disability designation, and I'm grateful to the civil servants who processed this relief. For if it was not for this, my borrower's application would still be pending. But despite this relief, this debt continues to show on my credit reports, while my pleas for assistance to my student loan servicers remain unanswered. Instead of helping student veterans and borrowers like myself, the Trump administration is trying to dismantle the Department of Education, which would make it more difficult for cheated students like myself to seek justice and relief. I've also read the president and his education secretary have fired the entire team charged with overseeing student loan servicers and holding them accountable for failing to do their job. This is shameful. I'm also troubled to watch congressional Republicans advance legislations that would make massive cuts to education programs, financial aid, and student protections to pay for billionaire tax cuts, making it easier for other for-profit schools like Argosy to prey on the dreams of future students everywhere. We cannot allow this. I want to say simply for the record, while I follow issues closely, I choose not to affiliate with the Democrat or Republican parties. This is not a partisan issue. I say this as an American, as a taxpayer, as a veteran who proudly served this country. I believe we all must stand up against these efforts to put higher education out of reach for working American families. We must ensure that education remains a pathway to the American dream. This is the country that I fought for. This is the country I know and I love. I thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ms. Snyder. Thank you, and thank you all. I very much appreciate this. We're going to start the questions, but we're going to have to take a little pause because I have to run down and vote. So I'm going to go vote. I'll be right back. What is it the substitute teacher is left in charge for just a minute? So anyway, we'll be back as soon as we can and we'll get started. And I'm going to see if can we get any more chairs for people? We're going to see if we can get some more chairs. Thank you. I'll be right back. Back in session. Thank you all, and we've been joined by Senator Herono. So I'm going to start the first round of questions here. Everyone should have a shot at the American dream, no matter their income, their race, their zip code, no matter what. And for more than a century, it's public education that has put that dream within reach for millions and millions of Americans. But the cost of college and other post-high school training programs has gotten way too high, and that has left millions of students with crushing student loan debt. Instead of trying to help, Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress are pouring gasoline on the fire. At this very moment, they are plotting another round of tax cuts for their billionaire buddies, and they want to pay for it by slashing investments in families that are just trying to build some security. Last month, Republicans on the House Education and Workforce Committee advanced one piece of Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. The Republican plan cut Pell Grants that help working class families pay for college, jack up monthly payments for student loan borrowers, and stretch out how long it takes for borrowers to repay those loans by another 10 years. So, Professor Glater, you have spent years studying the impact of student loan debt. How will the Republicans' bill affect the typical borrower?
In concrete terms, we found that a typical family of four headed by a college graduate earning median income with average debt burden would have to pay almost $5,000 more per year. There's a separate estimate found that eliminating the subsidized loans that you mentioned will increase the typical borrower's costs by $12,000 over a 10-year repayment period. For many borrowers, these cost increases will be unsustainable and will force them to look for other lines of credit, which will be more costly for them to pursue as a result.
So when you say unsustainable, what you mean is they just can't make the payments.
But
So
yes.
what do they end up doing in that case?
Well, presumably, if they're unable to make payments, they will fall into delinquency and potentially into default, and then have to deal with the collections regime that we've already touched on.
All right, and we're going to talk some more about what it means to fall into delinquency and what that does for people. So here we are at a time when the cost of college is already too high for millions of students. Donald Trump and his Republican buddies in Congress are not lowering them. They are adding $400 a month on average for the family's costs. So, Ms. Aliche, you're someone, I think you described in your testimony, you had over $50,000 in student loan debt after earning your master's so that you could become a preschool teacher. Woohoo for preschool teachers, good for you. Then you became a personal finance educator who helps Americans navigate their debt loads. Can you explain a little bit about what $400 added to the monthly bills of someone who's trying to balance out student loan debt actually means?
Well, yeah, I brought some of those stories with me. I asked them to share them. So a woman named Shell reached out to me. She was able to graduate college with her bachelor's. She was able to get a job paying her $35,000 a year, but her student loan debt is $98,000. She's currently struggling to pay the $700 student loan debt bill that she has to pay monthly. So imagine adding another $400 to that. It's unimaginable and basically impossible.
Yeah, you know, I appreciate your doing this. You know, Ms. Aliche, your story is one of many. You've had other people write in. I've had other people write in. There are 43 million borrowers across America right now. And jacking up student loan debt not only hurts family by family by family, the fact that it affects so many people will have an impact on our entire economy, especially at a time when Trump's tariffs and chaos are going to push up prices for families and many economists say are pushing our entire economy into a recession. So, Professor Glater, let me come back to you. How would Republicans' plans to raise costs for borrowers affect the American economy?
So every borrower is different, and monthly payments will differ for each borrower, which makes an overall estimate difficult. But consider for a moment just the borrowers who are enrolled in the Biden administration SAVE plan, who are currently not paying anything at all. We expect that the average such borrower will begin having to pay several $100s per month. There are 8 million of those borrowers. The aggregate impact will be in the tens of billions of dollars in 1 year alone.
So we're talking about just basically sucking tens of billions of dollars out of this economy. So for every economist right now who's looking at the projections as a consequence of the tariffs, as a consequence of laying off federal workers, as a consequence of cutting grant programs and research funding, as a consequence of defunding much of the climate work right now, every economist who's looking at those impacts on the economy should add to it what Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to do to student loan debt, because it's going to suck even more money out of the economy, put potentially 43 million families on average paying another $400 out of pocket. All right, this is an economic disaster. It is hard for students themselves, hard for their families, but hard for our whole economy. And all of this is self-inflicted. The only reason the Republicans are pushing this is so that they can fund tax cuts for a handful of billionaires and millionaires. So this really is the kind of choice we make as Americans, and the Republicans say it is more important to favor those handful of billionaires over millions of students whose only sin was to try to get an education. And that's what this hearing is about today. It's about telling our stories, and it's about fighting back. Senator Herono?
Thank you very much. Oh, you would think by now I would have figured this out. So it's great to see everybody, and I saw people outside too, because this is an overflow crowd. And I want to thank Senator Warren and, of course, my friend Senator Booker for being here. And there are lots of other of my colleagues who are very, very concerned about this basically frontal assault on federal support for education and the ripple effects on our economy, on our families, truly with this upside-down priority of supporting the billionaire buddies. So I know that the Pell Grants is a very important factor. In fact, there are a lot of students who go to our colleges in Hawaii who rely on a majority, in fact, and some of our community colleges are made up of students who are relying on Pell Grants. Now, the other thing that is being shifted is this massive, the loan program. And this is something that Senator Warren has very much championed, but we're talking about 43 million people, 1.7 trillion in student loans that's supposed to be handled by SBA. Professor Glater or any of the other people testifying, I mean, what is this going to do to SBA, even as the SBA program, one of the smallest offices in our federal bureaucracy, how are they supposed to handle this kind of volume? Professor Glater?
That's a terrific question, and I do not know the answer how the SBA is going to handle the size of the federal student loan portfolio. I wish I had a better response prepared for you. I don't.
Anybody else want to weigh in? Nope. So one of the things that I would like to bring up is also the assault on DEI, better known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if that doesn't define democracy, I don't know what does. So I think we need to very much push back against all of these efforts to get rid of DEI, which means that our histories, many, well, at least 2 out of 3 people here, our histories will not be part of the curriculum. So if anybody wants to weigh in on what?
She was including you. She was
Okay, all of us. Okay, and Elizabeth, because women comprise diversity. So anyone want to just talk about the how damaging these attacks on DEI and these efforts to eliminate DEI everywhere that the federal government is doing anything to support? I mean, what is that going to do?
Yes, can I
to
share
our
my?
education?
So one of my concerns, so I started the budgetista right in Newark, New Jersey. Shout out to my former mayor, Senator Cory Booker, and my current senator. And I started it because I noticed in my community that financial education was not easily accessible to women that look like me. And there were just millions of women who were reaching out to me saying, one, I'm making pennies on the dollar compared to men, but especially as Black and brown women, we make even less. And so to take away opportunities that would, it doesn't even level the playing field, but at least gives us the cards to play with would be devastating to my community.
Professor?
I was just going to say, what these initiatives have in common is undermining efforts at inclusion. And so the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion work against efforts to make what we've been talking about, higher education, more inclusive. That's on top of the financial effects, because we know that the populations that disproportionately need the federal aid that we've also been talking about, those are disproportionately populations that are consist of members of historically excluded groups.
So the president has, I just want to finish my thoughts here. The president has described his blaming either immigrants or DEI for a lot of things, including the horrific accident involving the crash in the Potomac. And he said it is common sense to blame DEI. And I said it is racist, sexist bullshit. Okay, that's it. Thank you. We fight back.
That's right. Thank you, Senator Herono. Leader Schumer.
Thank you.
Push your button.
Thank you. What was that last word? I never heard that one. I'm
heard
from Brooklyn. We don't talk like that. We don't effing talk like that. In any case, thank you. I want to thank Senator Warren. She has done a great job. First, this is a spotlight forum. I don't know if it was explained before why we have these. Our Republican colleagues are doing so many bad things to so many people, but they don't want the truth to come out. And since they're in the majority, they can hold hearings in the regular hearing rooms whenever they want. We wanted them to have a hearing on student debt, and in effect, they wouldn't. We invited Linda McMahon to come. She wouldn't. But these spotlight hearings let us show America what is going on. And we want to thank all four of you on the panel and everyone here in the audience, standing room only, to say the least, for coming and helping us show what's going on. I want to thank Senator Warren for leading this hearing. She's been our great leader on this issue. She and I have been brother and sister fighting this issue for how many years?
Too many.
Too many.
Too many. But we've had
But
some successes.
We've had some successes over the time. And I want to thank Senator Booker and Herono as well, who have done a great job in terms of this issue. The bottom line is very simple, okay? Donald Trump is trying to undo all the progress we've made to expand high-quality education to every family. Education's always been that ladder up. It's always been a way that people my father was an exterminator, didn't go to college, but the good education I got in New York City public schools and then in higher education enabled me to become the minority leader of the Senate. Without education, that wouldn't have happened, plain and simple. And so we believe strongly that we should support education in every way, whether it's pre-K, whether it's K through 12, whether it's higher education. We believe that we should make those ladders that people can climb up on more available to everybody. Because there's so much talent in this country, but because of reasons that some of you have already stated, that talent is not utilized. And that's bad not only for the individuals who are talented, but because they didn't have money or they're Black or brown or LGBTQ plus or Hispanic or Asian American. All that talent is not utilized for the good of America. And our student loan program was envisioned to help provide those ladders for people who didn't have the money to go to school themselves. And it's just horrible that they are trying to cut this, that they are cutting this. What they're doing to America's public education is utterly indefensible. They want to, you know how much they want to cut out of the Republican budget in the bill they just passed yesterday in the House? $350 billion. It hurts tens of millions of people, their families, but it hurts America. That's what they don't understand. They don't understand. They want just a limited few. They're doing all these cuts, whether it's student loans, whether it's K through 12, whether it's college. You know why they're doing it? To have billionaires get even a bigger tax break. God bless the billionaires. They got a lot of money. They don't need a tax break, especially when it's taking away your ability to either continue in school or live a decent life. Because I know so many people every month, they say, how am I going to pay the debt this month? And at the same time, provide a decent life for my children, or get a new job, or buy a car, or even move so I might find a better job. It's just awful. So the bottom line is that the cuts to education are just atrocious. The cuts in terms of student loans are atrocious. The cuts in every way are hurting. But we're fighting. We are not going to give up this fight. Every one of us benefited. None of the three of us came from a background of any privilege. And all three of us can probably say it's because of education throughout the years that we were able to do something with ourselves. Why can't every other young American have that advantage? When I grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, if you ask the average American, they would say, and say, how's your future going to be? They're going to say, if I work hard, I'll be doing better 10 years from now than I'm doing today, and my kids will be doing still better than me. People don't say that anymore. And there are a lot of reasons. The high cost of housing, the lack of adequate job opportunities, but one of the main reasons is the inadequacy of education all the way through. So we're with you. We're going to win these fights. But here's what I ask everyone to do, and I know we have a lot of people listening. We're streaming this. Make sure you call, particularly if it's a Republican, but do it either way. Call your senator, call your Congress member, and say, no effing way. You don't have to say that. No way are we going to support you if you support these cuts. And tell them that they must vote no on the budgets that's coming up, the reconciliation bill and the budget bill that are coming up in the House. If they don't vote no, you don't vote yes for them. So thank you for being here. Thank again Senator Warren for holding this great hearing, and on to victory. We're going to win these fights.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Schumer. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Senator Booker, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the leadership of Elizabeth Warren. Before I got to the Senate, from some 13 years ago, she was a bright light in calling out issues that were just absurd. The fact that back then you taught me really how much money, billions of dollars, the federal government was making off of the backs of young people. This should not be a profit center. It should not be a time to take advantage, charge usury rates, trap people in lifetimes of drowning debt. It should be a pathway, not just to a better life for the borrower, for the student, but really for a better America. Because we know the greatest natural resource that any nation can have in a global knowledge-based society is the genius of its young people. This nation should be doing so much more, helping people have pathways to higher education, towards training, towards apprenticeship programs, towards making sure that they can manifest their genius and their dreams in a world that desperately needs the best from folks. And so this spotlight hearing is a consistent pattern of passionate, really, to me, leadership from Elizabeth Warren, and I'm grateful to be one of the members who's benefited from her strength, from her leadership, from her example, and to be able to join her, not just today, but in a lot of this work has been one of the more gratifying parts of my time in the Senate. And so I want to jump right in because we've got this extraordinary panel. I don't know if you noticed this, sandwiched by Bonni's. It's very important. It's a very, 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 very important here. We've got some Bonni power going on. But I want to jump right in because we know how much abuse there is in this sector, how many people are seeking to take advantage of our students. Mohila and other servicers have faced repeated criticism for mishandling student loans, failing to send timely bills, offering incorrect repayment guidance, and contributing to the distress of so many borrowers throughout the nation. In Jersey, the stakes are really high. 1.2 million borrowers hold a collective of $43.3 billion in student debt with an average balance of $37,201. This is among the nation's highest. Now, meanwhile, the Trump administration now has actually slashed oversight at the Department of Education, holding these folks accountable, cutting half of the federal student aid's staff, including those monitoring loan servicers, processing complaints from American citizens, and administrating relief through borrower defense, the people that were standing up for the borrowers. This has resulted from in unanswered complaints and growing mistrust. So, to the Bonni on my left, given your experience at the Department of Education and seeing this dismantling of borrower support under the Trump administration, what reforms are most urgently needed now to restore what every American should want, which is accountability for servicers, like the one I mentioned at the top?
It's tough to say what is most important when so many things are broken and they are breaking more and more things every day. But I think it's important to reiterate that right now, more than 10,000 borrowers haven't received an answer to their complaint. This means they can't get an answer to why they can't enroll in income-driven repayment plans, why they can't access loan forgiveness programs like public service loan forgiveness, like borrower defense, or basic questions about like, how can I get my billing statement sent for the correct amount? How can I make sure my payment is going to the right place? And without these basic fundamental protections, borrowers don't stand a chance. I will say, even with I was quite literally the nation's expert in navigating student loan problems, and my student loan servicer still screwed up my loans. And if they can't do my loans correctly, normal people don't stand a chance.
Right, because they don't have an advocate. These are powerful companies that can often inflict real harm and damage to them, their credit reports, and more, correct?
Yeah, student loan debt, even if a borrower does everything right and their servicer does everything right, we still see a ripple effect across their financial life. Higher rates for home mortgages, struggling to buy a car, delayed retirement. When their student loans get knocked off track, all of those ramifications are amplified. And then if a borrower is in default, good luck. We could even take their passport if they're in default. And so we need to make sure that student loan servicers are following the law and giving borrowers access to the repayment protections promised by Congress, and the Department of Education is supposed to uphold.
All right, Jonathan, I want to turn to you because number one, you are literally surrounded by powerful women behind you, to the left, to the right, in front of you. You're a very, very lucky man. You should feel safe, secure, centered. So I want to put you in the spot as your fellow bald-headed brown man. I'm a little jealous that I have to leave, but you get to stay centered in this extraordinary room. You're a very, very lucky person. But let me lean on some of your wisdom, if I may. Your testimony that you gave was just sobering and with such detail. You illuminated really the compounding harm caused by executive and legislative attacks on borrower protections. And that, to me, is a story that needs to be told. Republicans in Congress have advanced legislation that would eliminate subsidized and Grad Plus loans, slash Pell Grants, tighten eligibility, making it harder for people to qualify for Pell Grants, extend income-driven repayments they want to do to 30 years, eliminate the gainful employment and 90-10 rules. They want to weaken borrower defense and closed school discharge. In New Jersey, again, as I said, 1.2 million borrowers struggling under these policies and with the sword of Damocles of the threatened legislation that seems to be coming. So based on your research and the work of the Student Loan Law Initiative, what specific legislative or regulatory actions would you recommend Congress take to protect access and affordability for students, particularly if the proposed GOP legislation becomes law in this country, which would be terrifying?
That's actually much easier to answer than the last question. I think the answer is undo what this legislation would do. I think the borrower defense to repayment rules are essential. I think a version of the gainful employment rule is essential. I think restoring and, in fact, increasing Pell Grants, these are essential steps to preserve the accessibility of higher education for working class families.
Well, before I leave you centered amongst these extremely strong people, I do want to say that I'm very proud to have partnered with Elizabeth Warren in introducing legislation today to suspend wage garnishment for student loan borrowers. This is such important legislation. And this is the kind of thing that we need to continue to fight. The power of the people is greater than the people in power. We are in a dark moment. We do have these bills coming that threaten to do such harm. But the extraordinary leader to my left gives me strength. The people who are here give me strength and hope. We are going to overcome these challenges and create a nation like we should, where the American dream is possible for anyone with the grit, guts, and determination to advance their education, their training, sees greater and greater opportunities for them to contribute to this nation. So thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is what we learned. Partnership is what this is all about. And there is no better partner in this fight than Senator Booker. So thank you, Senator Booker. So let's get back. I want to talk some more about Trump, Elon Musk, and Secretary McMahon. 3 billionaires who are going to rewrite public education and access to post-high school education. They are dismantling the Department of Education, and the entire claim is that they are doing it for efficiency. They want a more efficient system. In fact, Secretary McMahon has said that she can fire half of the staff at the Department of Education without programs, quote, falling through the cracks. Get rid of half the people and the programs won't fall through the cracks. Now look, most Americans think that doesn't pass the smell test. This is not likely to work. Remember, these are the federal workers who run the financial aid programs for working class families. These are the workers who make sure that students with disabilities actually have someone to help them so they can be part of the educational system. But Secretary McMahon keeps on repeating this argument, so I want to spend some time today just testing it out a little bit. Now, the first place to go to test it is with DOJ, because DOJ has already said she's wrong. They have admitted this because they've said service will get worse with these cuts. According to a recent report, a DOJ staffer at the Department of Education said, and I quote, "I understand there has been significant work done to improve customer service at the Department of Education. However, we need now to let go of the Cadillac service and opt for the Toyota." So let's just take a quick look at that. Ms. Aliche, you work with people every day who are trying to deal with student loan debt. You're an advisor and a finance educator. Do you think that Americans before the cuts are getting Cadillac treatment from the Department of Education?
No. In fact, I think the Cadillac can be qualified as a lemon. I stand before you representing 2 million women, mostly, in this country. And one of them, LaShawn, she shared that her current student loan repayments are $2,000 a month, more than her mortgage. Yeah. She is drowning, and she's been doing everything to try to lower that. She's been on hold for hours at a time, has not been able to reach anyone when it comes to her servicer. She's emailed, she's filled out forms online. She is drowning, and so much so that her youngest daughter is ready to start college, and instead of being excited for her, she's afraid because she doesn't know how she's going to be able to afford that.
Right. So, Ms. Latreille, until recently, you were a top-ranking official at the Education Department. Elon Musk has cut federal student aid staffing by 20%. Reportedly, DOJ wants to cut the department's budget for student loan servicing, that's what we're talking about here, by 60%. So will cutting the budget for student loan servicing by 60% increase efficiency at the Department of Education?
Absolutely. As you can hear from the laughing, I think everyone in this room knows absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Say a bit more about what's going to be the impact of a 60% cut or even a 20% cut. Ms. Aliche has given us kind of where it starts, right? How much people were already struggling. to get help when they had a problem with their student loans.
Yeah, FSA was already understaffed and underfunded, and these cuts are just going to make things worse. Longer hold times, longer timelines to get answers from their complaints, less or currently no oversight of the student loan servicers that take their money each month.
Yeah, that one is a stunner, isn't it? I just to make sure everybody's following this. The student loan servicers have been repeatedly found to have misrepresented to students, misled students, failed to do the billing correctly. I mean, just the basics of what it takes to do a loan, just over and over and over, because they don't want to spend the money to do it. They have also been found, some of them, to have actually deliberately steered borrowers into the wrong programs because it made more money for the servicer than the program that was best for the borrower. So this stuff is all documented. It's been out there for a long time, and that was true when they at least had some oversight. And the current plan now, in fact, what they've done is, you were just saying, Ms. Latreille, what's happened to the people who are overseeing the student loan servicers?
They've all been fired.
Yes, they've all been fired. So I hope everyone's feeling better now. I'm sorry, Ms. Latreille, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
President Trump and the DOJ team have created a race to the bottom among the student loan servicers,
Yeah.
and the only people that suffer from that are student loan borrowers.
Okay. So that's what we're talking about here. You cut the staff and you get rid of the people who do oversight, and what was already a problem, a bad problem in student loan servicing, becomes worse. Now, Linda McMahon says she has a solution for that, and that is she's considering replacing the call centers where your friend or the person who had consulted with you was on the phone. Did you say 4 hours?
She said just for hours and hours.
Hours and hours. She wants to replace those call centers, or is considering replacing those call centers, with AI chatbots. So instead of having financial aid experts reviewing complaints and responding to borrowers, she wants ChatGPT to do the job. Ms. Snyder, let me let you take this one. You were a student loan borrower for many years. I think it's a veteran is the right person to take this one on. If you had a problem with your loans, for example, the loan shows up twice in your credit report, would you want an AI chatbot to respond rather than a real person?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
You know, I hear this analogy between, we want to give Cadillac service, but it's a Toyota. In my opinion, it is a skateboard with either broken or squared wheels.
Yeah.
You know, to me, when I'm using or when I'm listening to an artificial being trying to answer a question, well, what if there's a question that I need to answer? This AI bot is not going to answer that question for me. Or what if the answer that I need is just a short, quick, answer? And what I find with, being on the phone with the artificials, I think sometimes I'm on the phone longer than it takes for me to get my issue resolved. And a lot of times, the issue is never resolved. And so, no, I'm not for AI at all. I think it's ridiculous.
I just want to say about this to remind everyone, anyone who has never been through student loan hell, and I'm going to assume that's not Donald Trump, not Elon Musk, and not Linda McMahon, that the consequences of not getting good advice when you're having a problem with your student loan can be enormous. It can mean being put in the wrong loan program, which can cost not just thousands of dollars, but literally tens of thousands of dollars. It can mean not getting a program you can manage and make your monthly payments every month, and instead you fall into default. And from there, your problems just snowball. So your credit rating goes to hell, and then everything is more expensive. Harder to rent an apartment, impossible to take out a mortgage, more expensive to get a car loan, even your insurance can cost more because your credit rating has gone down. So we're not just talking about inconvenience or even hours on the phone. We're really talking about the difference between people getting the help so that they just get what they're legally entitled to. People who say, I will do my best to pay my loan, but help me understand where it is, fix the problem. You've failed to account for my latest payment. You've got me confused with somebody else. Trying to straighten out those problems. And no surprise, 3 billionaires don't think that is a part of the responsibility that running the student loan program is all about. The number of people who will get hurt by these decisions to make cuts at the Department of Education will be measured ultimately in the millions. And for some, they will never even know what went wrong. All they will know is they can't put their lives back on track, all because 3 billionaires thought this was a good idea and would produce a little more money for tax cuts. For who? For the billionaires. So thank you on this. Let me call on Senator Van Hollen. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Senator Warren, and it's been great to partner with you on many of these issues over the years, including trying to hold student loan servicers accountable. That's been a big challenge under normal circumstances, but what the Trump administration is doing is taking off all the guardrails, and that is going to hurt millions and millions of people. Thank all of you for being here to testify. You know, really, we should be having these hearings in the regular committees, but we've unfortunately seen a dereliction of duty on behalf of our Senate Republican colleagues who apparently do not want to know what kind of harm is going to be done by the Musk operation, by the Trump fiscal year 26 budget, and by what's happening in the House as we speak with the so-called reconciliation bill, which is really just a giveaway to billionaires at the expense of everybody else. So I'm glad to see the signs here saying we want to put student borrowers over billionaires, because what's happening in the House right now, as we speak, is just the opposite. They're putting billionaires first and everybody else last. If I could, Dr. Gator, I know we've discussed some of the measures that have been sort of planned in the House bill as we speak. Their reconciliation bill makes very alarming changes, eliminating subsidized loans for low-income undergraduates, ending the Grad School Plus program, restricting access to the Parent Plus loans, and limiting affordable income-based repayment options. So all of that will do great damage, and I think it will probably force people who want to go to college either to not go because it's just unaffordable, or drive them toward much more expensive private loans. Could you just talk about how, what will happen if these students really are still determined to go but don't have these other options?
There's a certain irony to the situation because it was concern about private student loans that led to the first legislation creating a student loan program back in the Sputnik era in the late 1950s. But that's what it looks like would happen. So if the caps on total borrowing amounts in the reconciliation bill apply to borrowers, borrowers will have to borrow from banks or other private providers of credit on interest rates that are likely to vary and almost certainly going to be worse than the terms on federal student loans, and of course without the benefit of the repayment programs that federal loans offer.
Yeah, and of course, while the students lose, who benefits, right? Those lenders who are going to charge much higher interest rates. So again, back to folks who are already very well off and companies that are already doing very well at the expense of everybody else. I know the House bill also proposes changes to the PEL grant eligibility, especially making it hard for people who don't keep regular schedules, maybe have kids, other obligations, work obligations. Could you talk about how that will shut the door on opportunities for many people?
Sure. The reconciliation bill imposes limits, or really requirements, on students in terms of the number of credits they have to be taking in a given time period in order to be Pell eligible. So that means if someone, for example, is working part-time, it'll be more difficult to satisfy the requirement and get the benefit of the grant.
Right. I call this the great betrayal because candidate Trump talked about how he was going to be there for working people, people trying to make ends meet. And in fact, all these things make it much harder for those people and benefit the billionaires at the top. My final question relates to what I think we all know is the 9/10 loophole. For those of us who've been working in this area for some time, we worked hard to close that in 2021 because there were a lot of fly-by-night, for-profit entities that were essentially scamming students because they were getting large federal payments and not matching them at all with any of their own skin in the game. But this bill, this Republican bill, opens up that loophole again with respect to veterans. Ms. Snyder, if you could just speak to that issue, because the entire goal of closing that loophole was to make sure that students don't get scammed. And in this case, by opening up this loophole, it's very much targeting veterans specifically to be scammed. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you, Senator, for this question. As a veteran, when I decided right out of high school to raise my hand and serve this country, I did so because I believed in, America, of course, and I took my oath to the Constitution, unlike others, very seriously. To go to school was always a dream of mine, as my testimony stated. But to find out as a veteran that my pursuit of the American dream in higher education was done so, I felt betrayed. It's like I wasn't just a student to them. I was a number. I wasn't just a student to them, or I wasn't a student to them. I was a benefit. And to, get to the place where I was, in 3 years in, being diagnosed with cancer, having to withdraw for health reasons, and then, not being allowed to go back, and then my school closing, and then, not to mention the amount of debt that I had afterwards. It was, again, an immense betrayal. It doesn't diminish, my thoughts or feelings about this country. It doesn't, for me, diminish my service or my continued service to my community. However, I think it's shame, an absolute shame, the way some of our veterans, or I should say us, let me rephrase that. I think it's a shame how we as veterans are treated.
Well, thank you for being here to share your powerful story. Thank you for your service. And as I see a sign back there, and you summed it up well, served and scammed. And people who have served nobody in America should be scammed. But to actually create this provision that targets for scamming those that have served is especially abhorrent. So we will look forward to working with you to prevent these very, very reckless provisions from getting into law. And your voices are very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very much appreciate it, Senator Van Hollen. I just want to pick up on that as we wrap this spotlight hearing up. Think about who uses the student loan system. It's not the children of rich people. They do fine, right? They can afford to write a check. This is about people who have the dream and who want to make something out of it. They want to turn it into something. They've got a particular vision in mind. They want to be a teacher, or they want to be a counselor, as you did. They want to do a thing that's going to take this education, this training that they're going to get. And we do it both ways with these changes at the Department of Education. Making the cuts at the Department of Education increases the odds that those who borrow money will get cheated. They will get cheated by the student loan borrowers that they're lenders that they're funneled through. We already know that they're problematic because they're getting rid of the people who do the oversight. They also will get cheated in a different way, and that is by making the barriers a little higher. Some people will never make it across, and so they'll go to a private lender and sometimes to a predatory private lender. And no matter what, to a private lender who is likely to cost them a lot more money. And there's a third way they'll get cheated. They had the drive, they had the ambition, they had the smarts to do the work, but they just couldn't make it over the barrier. And so they never get the education that they'd hoped for. They never get the training that they'd hoped for. They never get that opportunity. So they are worse off, their family is worse off, and our nation is worse off because one more person who would have been out there in the fight, making their contributions, the person who knows what they might have invented, how they might have helped, that person has just been closed out of that part of the system. That is part one of what's happening here, but the other part is loosening up the oversight of the colleges themselves. So it's about the lenders, but it's also about some of these colleges. Look, most of the colleges and universities out there, most of the apprenticeship programs, they're good programs. They are doing their very best for students. Some of our technical training in this country, some of the best in the world, they are doing a good job. But there are others who figured out there is money to be made. And the money to be made is exactly as you describe it. Ms. Snyder, it's money to be made off you. It's money to be made off our vets. They are the ones who are right in the crosshairs on where to go. And I want to say, they also go after single moms, right? People who are, you're also a single mom, thanks, Ms. Snyder, yes. They go after single moms. They advertise on the T in Boston. You want to try to do better for your children? This is how you can do it. And they get people in, they get them to sign on the dotted line, they get access to those federal dollars, they make a lot of money, and they leave people with student loan debt that they not only can't pay, they can't get out from underneath. It's not like your credit card debt and you say, okay, I declare bankruptcy, I'm done with all this. The answer is nope, you got this student loan debt most likely forever until you pay this off. So I really want to say one more time how much I appreciate having all four of you here and everybody in this room. I read your signs. I appreciate that you care and that you put your energy into this. I want to leave the last question for Ms. Snyder. And I want to do this partly because Secretary McMahon said she wouldn't come today because she was sure she wouldn't get a fair hearing. She wouldn't come because we were going to ask her about these cuts. If she had been here, I would have asked her, how do you respond to this? Explain to me how you think you can cut 60% of your staff and programs that are already tottering won't just collapse and leave people with no help. Tell me how you can fire the people who engage in the oversight to make sure that people like Ms. Snyder don't get cheated and still expect that they're not going to get cheated. They're going to get cheated more. So those are the questions I wanted to ask, and I'll just be blunt. She could have asked her own questions. I'd have been happy to have her here to ask whatever questions you wanted to ask. But she wanted to make in this letter, to imply, to suggest outright, this is all just political. I want to finish this by asking you, I hope you don't mind my doing this, Ms. Snyder. My staff had just done some checking before when we first were inviting you. You're not a Democrat, as I understand.
No, ma'am, I'm not.
She is not a Democrat. As I understand, you're not even registered to vote.
That is correct, ma'am.
So not somebody who's got a political stick in this, but somebody who's been directly affected by the past struggles of the Department of Education and now looking at how the Department of Education is going to fire the team that makes sure that schools and lenders and servicers don't take advantage of students, that's going to gut the team that monitors the scams and that has slashed the Office of the Ombudsman, which fielded hundreds of thousands of borrower complaints every year and helped defrauded borrowers. Get rid of all that. So tell me, as a not Democrat, as a not registered voter, not a political person, I think it would be fair to say, do you support President Trump and Secretary of Education efforts to cut the Department of Education and its programs?
Absolutely not. And, and I think it was important, to point out that I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not registered to vote. There's a story behind that, but that's a whole nother story. And so it was important, again, to highlight this is not a partisan issue. It is not just, people like me who don't subscribe to either political party. I have Republican friends who are in the same issue. I have Democratic friends who feel this thing too. I have friends who identify as independent who still this. I think what they're doing to the Department of Education is abhorrent. This is madness. And so no, absolutely not.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Senator King.
Thank you to my friend Senator Warren, and thanks to all of you for being here. And I'm glad that we had a hearing with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and then floor activity, so I was trying to get here on the wire while
You did. You made it, and you've got a great panel here.
I got 45
And you've got a
minutes
great
of questions.
audience.
There's so much I want to talk about, but I know my colleagues have done a good job already. I'll tell you a couple of things I'm concerned about, or questions I have, and then a concern I just want to put on the table. And Senator Warren has heard me state this before. I'm very worried about the proposed, dismantling the Department of Education and its effect on students with disabilities and their parents. When we had the confirmation hearing in the previous Trump administration with Secretary DeVos, her attitude was she really wasn't a public education supporter, really a private education supporter. But when I asked her, she supported public funds, even federal funds for private schools. Should those private schools have to follow the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act? And she said, no, that should really be for the states. The whole question of rights of students with disabilities should be for the states. Well, that states' rights in education was what landed us all in court in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. And the challenge with allowing states to decide what to do with students with disabilities or any group of students is that there could be a race to the bottom. And we so desperately need an Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education to make sure that states, and I was a governor, I like what governors do, but you've got to have oversight to make sure that states are helping students with disabilities. We're having a real focused effort right now on what's going on in the House on the reconciliation bill. And someone said earlier today at an event that I was at, the good news is they're not yet focused on special ed funding. And I said, yeah, but they really kind of are, because if you cut Medicaid, kids who are on IEPs in special education, okay, the IDEA might be paying for the education, but a child who needs a wheelchair to go to school, it's Medicaid that's paying for the wheelchair, not the IDEA. So Medicaid cuts cause me great concern. And the second thing, and I think I want to ask this to Ms. Latreille, public service loan forgiveness. This is so important. In the first Trump administration, without changing the program, they just quit approving loan forgiveness. And over the course of 4 years, I think they approved 7,000 applications, which was less than 3% of the total applicants. Nationally, in 4 years, 7,000. The Biden administration approved more than 33,000 Virginians in a single term, more than 1 million applicants. If we shrink the staff at the DOE, what is the likelihood that public service loan forgiveness does not get compromised, Ms. Latreille?
It's impossible it won't be compromised. Borrowers trying to access PSLF already wait on hold for hours on end when trying to contact their servicer. And what we can expect to see is nurses and teachers having to take time off of work just so they can call their servicer to make sure they're on track for loan forgiveness. And if things go wrong, their complaints will go into a black hole because there's no one left at FSA to answer them. Just like the thousands of borrowers who are already waiting on responses now for the complaints they've already filed. And I think what's worse is that these problems aren't just limited to borrowers pursuing PSLF. All borrowers are going to face the same struggle.
Can I ask in the audience, raise your hand if you've been affected by public service loan forgiveness. Okay, that's pretty impressive.
Yep.
And so let me say first, thank you for being a public servant, broadly defined. I mean, that's a healthy number of hands of people who've decided. And the fact that we can use a program like public service loan forgiveness to express appreciation, but also incentivize and encourage those of you to be public servants. What a great program. The last thing I'll say, because I know Senator Klobuchar would want to weigh in, here is a concern that I have that I haven't really thought through, but I'm just going to give it to all of us as a thought program. If you dismantle the Department of Education, if you cut funding for libraries, cultural institutions, and museums, if you cut research funding, if you cut funding for National Public Radio and the public broadcasting system, it starts to look not just like an anti-education, it's like the privatization of knowledge. If you can pay for knowledge, you can get knowledge. But if you can't, you won't have a library, you won't have a museum, you won't have public service loan forgiveness, you won't have, public broadcasting in a rural part of the country where that might be your access to hear a symphony or learn about the life of a jazz musician or a great artist. And I worry that there's sort of a privatization of knowledge initiative behind this. You even see it in funny little things, like we're not going to let the NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, provide data about the weather and about climate free of charge to people. You're going to have to pay for it. There will always be people who can pay for knowledge. But Jefferson, and in Virginia, we kind of always have to say something about Jefferson. He had this line that's in our state constitution, and it goes something like this: "Progress in government and all else depends upon the broadest possible diffusion of knowledge among the general population." So there was a goal of let's put the knowledge out there for everyone, and he wouldn't have imagined all knowledge being digitized and you have a search engine you can find. He wouldn't have imagined that, but it's sort of a Jeffersonian vision. But what the administration is doing, it seems like they're trying to reverse that and make knowledge like a private good. And if you can pay for it, you can get it. And otherwise, tough. And I'm nervous about that. But anyway, thank you for your advocacy, all of you for your advocacy, and thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Klobuchar.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Warren, for holding this really, really important hearing to spotlight what's happening right now. And I've got to say, as usual, Elizabeth is very organized. I sat down in my Minnesota chart.
Just in case. Just in case.
And I saw the New York was there.
New York was there.
Organized. And I see that.
You have Virginia?
And I know that you have had a lot of questions today, but as they say in the Senate, everything's been asked, but I haven't asked it. So I thought I might focus on a few different issues. One, I'm sure you've talked about, but PEL Grants. Actually, until I got ready for this meeting today, I wasn't aware of what they were doing on PEL Grants in the House Republican proposal. We have 107,521 PEL recipients in my state. And how they would reduce things for a quarter of the students of PEL recipients by cutting their maximum award by nearly $1,500, which is huge when people are struggling to get by in school. And maybe you, Ms. Latreille, could just talk about, as a PEL recipient, why that's made such a difference and for students, the PEL grant, and how that amount of money actually matters with what they're messing around with.
Yeah, Pell Grants make it possible for people to go to school. It is their entry point into the pathway that's going to get them the American dream that they deserve access to. And what we're seeing now is that short-term for-profit institutions have been waiting to cash in on the Pell program so that they can pad their profits. And once again, low-income students and families will be left footing the bill because they're going to be steered into using their one chance at grant funds, and all they're going to get in return is a worthless certificate.
Exactly. And I mean, I want to expand Pell Grants, right? I think we should be doing so much more with them. And that's why this is just so troubling, because they're going backwards. And Ms. Aliche, something else that I am really a fan of is TRIO, and it's been a real positive force in our state. And President Trump's budget proposal would completely eliminate TRIO. And the support it provides to nearly 870,000 students, as you know, low-income first-generation students, to help them to get into college and succeed. As an educator, first-generation student yourself, Can you speak to the barriers that first-generation students face and why the supportive trio is so critical?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. As my parents were Nigerian immigrants. They came here. They were the first to go to college. And my 5 sisters and I were fortunate enough to go to college, but we did not do so on our own. We leaned into federal funding in order to help us in our student loans. It took me a long time to pay mine down. And I think not having access, I could not be here without education. So one of the things growing up that I'd learned from my parents is that they saw education as the path. It is one of the ways that you can guarantee that you can change like who you're going to be and where you can see yourself. And without that, then we effectively cut off people's ability to live a better life, to start families, to buy homes. I've had people who told me like, I guess I'll never have children now. I guess I've been teaching financial education for 17 years. I guess I'll never buy a home. I have a woman, Shelley, she's a teacher in New York. She is a public school teacher. And she said she has been, because of her student loans, thankfully they were forgiven right before this, but she had to put off medical debt that she had to pay down. She wanted to get dentistry work done. She wasn't able to. She didn't have a savings account, and now she finally does. People put off regular everyday life.
Right.
They need assistance and help.
And it slows down our whole economy. I mean, I had my grandparents came over as immigrants on one side. The other was my great-grandparents. But my grandpa worked underground in the mines. He didn't get to graduate from middle school because he had 7 brothers and sisters. Parents died. He goes to work in the mines. And so my dad was the first one to go to a 2-year community college, got that degree, and then went and finished up at the University of Minnesota. And my mom, again, comes over and gets a teacher degree. And so without that, and my sister never graduated from high school. She had some issues. She went and worked manufacturing down in Iowa and got her GED, and then went to a community college for 2 years, and then got her 4-year degree. So in my own family, I see these, and got the highest score in the accounting exam in Iowa. But I just see these different paths to success. And I'm sitting here as the granddaughter of an iron ore miner who didn't even save money in a coffee can in the basement to send my dad to college, and the first woman elected to the Senate from our state.
Amazing.
And that's education. So thank
That's
you for
education.
bringing that story to us. Last and a little more in the weeds question, Professor Glater, but we know professors like in the weeds questions. The part of this, I remembered how much we tried to get some reform to FAFSA to make it easier for people to fill out, right? And what's going on with the Trump budget is laying off half of the Department of Education. That just sounds like some big bureaucracy, but it involves hundreds of federal student aid workers who help people with the FAFSA and help them if there's issues with the borrowing and the like. And it's almost impossible, especially these first-generation families. They want to get ahead. They're trying to fill this out. And could you talk about, I know you mentioned in your testimony that these firings are already creating disruptions. And can you talk about what future or issues or current issues are going to arise with FAFSA if we don't have the people to do the work to help the students?
I'm afraid we got a preview of what might happen with the rollout of the new form, right? We can anticipate that it will just be that much more difficult for students who are trying to do the right thing, who are trying to get the financing they need to pay for higher education, to get the help they need to complete the form, to get the funds to which they're entitled.
Yeah. After the rollout of the new FAFSA, my office was slammed with complaints and from people who were just trying to access the application, who were just trying to complete it. And it takes people to work through those to see, is it because their social security number was stolen? Is it because, there was a glitch with the form? There's still a lot of glitches. And without staff to work through those students aren't going to be able to access federal student aid. They're going to turn to a predatory private market. And that market has aggressively racist pricing models. And so these students who tried to do the right thing and tried to go to school are going to be left deeper in debt without any safety net.
Thank you, Senator
Taking my
Klobuchar.
form.
I'll get everybody signed off on these forms. Thank you for being here, Senator Kane. Again, thank all of you. I'm grateful to all of you for helping us put energy into this. We cannot roll over and just let this happen. There are a lot of people who don't understand what the Department of Education does and why it is so essential to our future. No nation builds a strong future by shortchanging the education of its young people. We are here today because we believe in the future we can build, and we know that path is education. So thank you all for being with us. This hearing is closed. Thank you. Thank you. Your story this morning about the butterfly.
Thank you so much.
Story day.